The temple stood where maps refused to agree, and sensors went quiet. It rose from a plain of glass stone left by wars so old that even the victors had forgotten why they fought. Pilgrims came from 100 worlds to stand. Most waited their entire lives. The gates were said to answer only 2 legends, 2 bloodlines shaped by prophecy, 2 minds tuned by destiny. That was the story repeated by guides and scholars, and the quiet sellers of charms who set up tents beyond. The wind lined the gates themselves were tall and smooth and dark. They drank light and returned none. No seam could be found, no handle, no mark of age. When a chosen one approached, the gates would open without sound, and the chosen would pass into the temple and never be seen again. What waited inside was unknown, some said. Knowledge, some said judgment. Some said a test that would decide the future of entire species on. The day the human arrived, the waiting field was crowded. Delegations stood. In careful rows with banners folded and heads bowed, monks of old orders murmured in tones meant to harmonize with the unseen mechanisms of the gates. Machines hovered and recorded every tremor in the air. The expectation was heavy enough to bend. Posture and breath. The human did not look like a legend. He wore a travel jacket patched with mismatched fabric and dust from 3 ports. His boots were scuffed. His hair was unremarkable. His name was Eli. He had taken the wrong shuttle. That was the beginning and the end of the miracle. Lie had been hired to deliver replacement filters to a relay station beyond the plane. The shuttle pilot had misread a beacon and dropped him at the pilgrim camp with an apology and a promise to circle back. The promise did not keep. The camp was quiet in the way of places that feared disturbance. Eli waited by his crate and checked his slate and tried to be small. Hours past. Delegations approached the gates one by one. Rituals were performed, songs were sung, sacrifices were offered. The gates did not move. The air grew tense. Whispers spread that perhaps the age of legends had ended. A steward noticed Eli and mistook him for an attendant. A hand gesture sent him forward with a group of hopefuls who believed their moment had come. Eli tried to protest, but the crowd pressed and the sound died in the open space. He found himself walking toward the gates with a crate in his hands and an apology forming on his lips. The gates opened. There was no thunder, no light, no sound at all. The dark surface simply parted like water accepting a stone. Gasps rippled through the field. Instruments spiked and failed. Monks fell silent. Eli froze with 1 foot lifted and eyes wide. Someone shouted that a legend had come. Someone else cried that the signs had been misread. The gates waited. Lie took the step because stopping felt worse. He crossed the threshold because the path was there. The crate bumped his knee. The gates closed behind him. Sighed the temple. Was not darkness. It was space shaped into calm lines of light-traced walls that curved without corners. The air smelled clean and old. Eli stood and listened to his own breathing. He said hello to nobody. His voice returned to him, gently a presence. Emerged not as a figure, but as attention. The temple became aware of him. It weighed him without scales. It measured him without numbers. It searched for the markers of legend and found none. No blood oath, no genetic seal, no crown of probability. Question. Formed without words. Why are you here? Lee answered with honesty. Because he had nothing else wrong. Turn job delivery. Sorry. The temple paused. It had waited a long time. It had been built to open only for those shaped by myth, because myth endured myth. Gave civilizations a way to accept change. The builders had believed that only legends could bear what the temple contained. The presence turned its attention inward and reviewed its own assumptions. The temple held records of failures and triumphs. It held designs for cities that floated and engines that folded distance. It held warnings written by those who had learned too late. It held a simple truth that had ruined empires. Power did not make wisdom. Belief did not make care. Legends came seeking confirmation. They came armored in certainty. They asked how to rule and how to win and how to be remembered. The temple tested them and found them wanting, so it sent them away into obscurity or silence, depending on the measure. The human stood and waited without knowing what to ask. He set the crate down because his arms were tired. He looked at the lines of light and thought they were beautiful. He wondered how long until the shuttle returned. The presence considered him again. found curiosity without hunger, fear without malice, responsibility without ambition. These were not legendary traits. They were ordinary. They were rare. The presence spoke at last by shaping thought into meaning. You're not chosen. You I not chosen. You I nodded. That tracks the presence continued. You may live. Laylee nodded again. Thank you. He turned and found the exit where it should be. The gates opened from the inside and light from the plains spilled in. A collective cry rose from outside. Eli stepped through, and the gates close. The field erupted. Delegations surged forward and were held back. Monks argued with scholars. Machines screamed errors. Eli was grabbed by the shoulders and asked questions. In a dozen languages, he raised his hands and told the truth. Nothing happened. Nice building. No one believed him. The idea that the gates could open for a mistake shook foundations. If legends were not required, then what did that say about the stories built around the temple? What did it say about the rulers who claimed descent from those stories? The human was escorted away for his own safety. A council convened in haste. Messages were sent across networks. Debate raged. The temple remained silent. Weeks passed. Pilgrims returned and tried again. The gates did not open. The story spread. Some called it heresy. Some called it hopla. Delivered his filters late and took another job. He forgot about the temple and the way people forget dreams that do not repeat. He did not know that the presence had changed inside. The temple, the systems adjusted, the criteria shifted. Legends were no longer weighted as heavily as before. Other measures rose. Care adaptability. The willingness to admit error. The gates began to open again, but not for kings or warriors. They opened for caretakers and translators and engineers who fixed things that were broken. They opened for people who had taken wrong turns and learned from them. Civilizations changed slowly at first, then all at once. Power structures bent toward service. History was rewritten not to erase legends, but to place them in context. Humanity was noticed in a new way. They were not the strongest. They were not the oldest. They were the ones who kept walking when a path appeared, even if it was a mistake. They were the ones who answered questions with honesty and left when told to leave. In time, Eli was asked to return. He stood before the gates again, older and still unremarkable. The presence greeted him like an old friend. It thanked him for teaching it. Simple lesson. Eli smiled and shrugged. He set down another crate. He walked inside, not as a legend, but as himself.